For today's training, thank you everyone for attending today's training. This is our third in our series of Critical Area 101 trainings for town planners and city planners. For today's training session, we're going to be taking a look at the submittal requirements and processes for projects that are located in the critical area. So here's an overview of our session today. First, we're going to take a look at private residential projects and what the process is for project review with those types of projects, including the notification requirements and the project notification form. Then we will look at the process for local government project review. So what the consistency report looks like and how that should be filled out, and what the full commission review process looks like. And then finally, we're going to end with a Q&A with one of our local planners, Brian Soper with the City of Salisbury. All right, so diving right in. First off, we're going to take a look at the submittal requirements for residential private projects. So for example, if a resident has applied for a building permit or a developer is requesting a subdivision, something along those lines. This is not for town-sponsored projects. That's a different process that we will review later today. So on this slide is a handy chart that outlines which types of projects need to be reviewed by the Critical Area Commission staff. But I want to point out that this is not the full list. The screenshot wouldn't fit when I cut and pasted it onto the slide. But most of you will have the full list in your local critical area program. So check your code for the full list, or of course, when in doubt, you can always ask your critical area contact if you have a question about where a project fits in terms of the notification requirements. So on this chart, you will notice that not every activity that takes place in the critical area needs to be sent to our office for review. So for example, if a project will result in less than 5,000 square feet of disturbance and does not impact a habitat protection area, you're not required to notify us. And then there are some projects that are required to be sent to us regardless of the critical area designation or the scope of work, such as an application for a variance to the local critical area program. So again, check your code for the full list or reach out to commission staff if you have a question about where a project may fall. So when you do receive an application or permit that requires critical area staff review, we ask that you fill out a project notification form, which is found on our website, and it kind of serves as a cover sheet when you send the submittal materials to our office. I want to emphasize the importance of filling out this form accurately and completely. You'll fill out this form based on the information that you receive from the applicant. So there may be instances where you have to look up some additional information on your own or go back to the applicant to get clarification. When the information on the project notification form is missing or inaccurate, or it doesn't match the site plan, it can impact our ability to provide comments back to you in a timely manner. I also want to mention that this form, along with the other materials necessary for a full submittal, should be emailed to our admin email address at cacadmin.dnr@maryland.gov. But there is a slight caveat to that because we will be switching to a new online project database and submittal portal around December or early next year. So the process will change a little bit, but we'll send out more information about the transition process and probably some additional trainings once that system is up and running. But you'll be entering in the same type of information into that database. So it's still worth us going through this form and the process today. So now, hopefully it'll work. I'm going to try to pull up an example of a complete project submittal. Okay, so please let me know if you don't see this, but you should be seeing a project notification form on your screen. And this form, and again, if it's too small, let me know. I can zoom in a little bit more. This form, I filled it out as just kind of a quick example. It's taking place in the town of Betterton. And we have some tax map, parcel information, tax ID, just some basic information that you should be including on this project notification form. And then there's information down here about this specific project and applicant information. If we have any Parks and Rec fans on the call, you may recognize some of these names. The project name is the Ludgate Dwyer Doghouse. It's we have the address, we have the local case number, and we have the applicant's name. And then down here, we have checked off what type of application is this project is falling under. So in this case, Miss Ludgate Dwyer has applied for a variance. So we checked that off there. The local jurisdiction contact information. So Ron Swanson is the town planner for the town of Betterton. So he filled out this information based on what Miss April Ludgate Dwyer provided. And he entered in his name and contact information down here because he is the point of contact that we will be addressing our comments and responses to after we have done our review of this project. He included the date that our comments are due by, and as well as the hearing date for the variance, like if it's a Board of Appeals hearing or something like that. Typically, our turnaround internally for project review is 2 weeks, but it's still helpful if you're able to put in a date in this area for when you need comments by. So moving down to the second page, Ron Swanson filled out this information. He gave us a brief description of the project, the applicant has proposed to construct a 70 square foot doghouse in the 100-foot buffer for her dog, her three-legged dog Champion. And so he also entered in some more information about the type of project. It's on a grandfathered lot. It's a residential project. And then down here, he filled out the site inventory information. So this is the critical area specific information on the site. So how much of the site, if it's not entirely in the critical area, is within the critical area, and what is that designation? So this whole property is in the LDA. He was able to calculate the amount of forest cover, tree cover on site, and then filled out if any was being created or removed. He also calculated the existing lot coverage on site, what the proposed or removed lot coverage would be, and then what the whole total would be if this variance request is to be approved. Scrolling further down is the variance information specifically. So since April submitted this project for a structure in the buffer, it requires a variance. So Ron filled out what the total buffer disturbance is, what that mitigation is, and then what type of variance it is. So since it's located in the buffer, he checked off buffer, and what that structure is, a doghouse for Champion. So in addition to this project notification form, Ron submitted the site plan that the applicant provided. So it's showing the proposed doghouse, the 100-foot buffer, existing structures, existing tree cover, and that kind of thing. And then he also submitted, and pretend that this is just filled out, the variance standards that the applicant has addressed when they submitted this variance request. So Ron compiled all this info based on the information the applicant requested, and then sent it all over to our office with the project notification form as kind of a summary of what's going on. So now I'm going to go back to our presentation, and hopefully this still works. That's an idea about the project notification form. So you saw that the applicant, Ms. Ludgate Dwyer, included a site plan with her variance application. Even something as minor as a building permit should be reviewed using a site plan. Site plan, including the site plan notes, is just a graphic representation of the project. It can be fairly simple, such as based on a boundary lot survey for a building permit, or something more complex based on engineered plans. But you should be able to identify some of this following information. You need to be able to show the critical area boundary and or the designation of the critical area on site, the location and size of lot coverage, which would ideally be called out by structure or surface type, the amount of or the total limit of disturbance or LOD, the location of the buffer or expanded buffer, including the amount of disturbance or clearing in the buffer, And then also just want to point out that the buffer should be field delineated based on existing conditions. The location and amount of existing trees, developed woodlands or forests, as well as those proposed to be cleared, and like the location of proposed stormwater management measures. So there's, some more things on the list, but that's kind of a general idea about all the information that should be included on a site plan. As I mentioned earlier, the information on the site plan, including the site area, proposed lot coverage, proposed clearing, should match the information on the project notification form. If information is missing, reach out to the applicant and/or the consultant and request a revised site plan, or you may have to do some additional research on your own, or you can reach out to critical area staff if you have questions. We want to note that the site plan does not have to be prepared by a consultant. What's important is that all the necessary information is included and that the plan is to scale. As long as these items are addressed, it doesn't really matter who prepares the site plan. All right, so now we are going to shift gears away from private projects and take a look at the review process for local government projects. So what is a local government project? It is development or land disturbing activities that are sponsored by the town and are proposed on town-owned or private land. Most local government projects require review for compliance with the local critical area regulations. However, the type of review depends on the scope of the project. So for instance, if no land is being disturbed or if only existing structures are being impacted, our office does not need to see it. So for example, that could include if you're remodeling the inside of a building or painting the exterior of the building, we don't really need to see that. Projects that result in minor land disturbance, also known as projects of local significance, require staff level review with a consistency report. And then projects that result in major land disturbance or are not consistent with the local critical area program require full commission review. So projects of local significance include development that is minor in scale, has environmental impacts that are confined to a parcel or immediate area. It is consistent with the local critical area program, and it does not meet the definition of major development. Projects of local significance are reviewed by commission staff through a consistency report. And it's up to the local jurisdiction to determine if a project is consistent with the local program. And by submitting a consistency report package to our office for review, it's our understanding that the project has already been vetted for consistency. Some examples may include underground utility replacement or upgrades, or new construction of recreational amenities like boat ramps, trails, or soccer fields. And so now I'm going to run through an example of a consistency report submittal. And hopefully it will load. All right. So this is the consistency report form that the Ocean City is submitting for a dog park. The consistency report form serves kind of as a way to streamline the submittal process. So as you see on this form, the form requests basic information regarding the project, such as the name, location, and critical area designation. So Ocean City, the planner for Ocean City, Leslie Nope, who works in the Department of Parks and Recreation, has submitted this project to redevelop an existing dog park and replace an existing pavilion at the dog park, but construct some new structures, including an agility course and a dog pool. She has included the project location as well as the critical area acreage and designation of the site. The project data section is where you're verifying the project is consistent with your critical area program. The project must meet the vegetation clearing and lot coverage limits for the critical area designation. And if there is vegetation cleared, adequate mitigation must be provided. And then if the project is located in the IDA, as it is with this example, it must meet the critical area 10% pollutant reduction requirement. So in this section, Leslie has entered in what the existing forest cover looks like, if there is any proposed clearing, which there is not, so no mitigation is required, although it is in the IDA, so there's a chance that there wouldn't be, unless you have special provisions in your code that wouldn't be required regardless. We have what the existing lot coverage on site looks like and the percentage of the lot coverage of the site that is covered with lot coverage, what the proposed lot coverage is, and then if this project is consistent, then what the new total lot coverage will be on site. Have the total LOD, and then since this project is located in the IDA, Leslie, the applicant, being the town, has included the 10% spreadsheet, and they're proposing a microbial-retention best management practice to meet the stormwater and 10% requirement. Final authorization and approval of the stormwater management and sediment and erosion control plans are pending. And there are no buffer impacts for this project, but if you notice this little note down here, if this project were to impact the buffer, that may bump it up to a conditional approval for full commission review project, as a dog park is not water dependent. So just something to keep in mind if there are any impacts to the buffer or other HPAs, please let your critical area contact person know, because that may change, it may not fit under a consistency report, and we may need to discuss additional requirements for additional review. Local projects must also submit a request to DNR Wildlife and Heritage Service for review of all other habitat protection areas. If other HPAs are found on site, the project may be bumped to conditional approval. And then, so again, early coordination with our office is important, as well as early review by DNR Wildlife and Heritage Service. So Leslie requested that review by DNR Wildlife Heritage Service, and they found no impacts to these HPAs. And this project is also not impacting tidal or non-tidal wetlands. And then down here, you'll see that Leslie signed it. It should be signed by the local planner who is submitting the project for review after they themselves have reviewed and verified the information and consistency with the local critical area program. So it shouldn't be signed by the consultant. It should be signed by the town planner. So along with the consistency report, Leslie Knope has included a copy of the site plan of the project, which shows the proposed development of the dog park, as well as the stormwater BMPs. She included the 10% spreadsheet that she filled out. And then she also included a copy of the DNR Wildlife and Heritage Service letter that says there are no impacts to rare, threatened, or endangered species. So this consistency report form, along with the site plans and other documentation like stormwater plans and the 10% spreadsheet and the Wildlife Heritage Service letter, should all be submitted to our CAC admin email, or in the future, our new database. Okay. So moving on, when a local project does not fit under a consistency report, it must come to the full commission for review and approval. Major development projects are large projects that are consistent with the town's critical area program, but will result in significant impacts in the critical area. Conditional approval projects are those that are not consistent with the criteria and requirements outlined in the town program. Any project that requires full commission review must submit the information and materials listed in the local project checklist. And as you'll see in the checklist, there's a lot of information that needs to be submitted, and public notice is required before a project can be heard at a commission meeting. So therefore, early coordination with our office is important to determine how the project will be reviewed and ensure that all appropriate information is available. Like the other documents, this project checklist and conditional approval form are available on our website, which now let's see if I can navigate here. How many tabs can I open today? All right. So this is our website, and you'll notice on the right-hand side here, some links to under the resources tab here. I'm going to go to local government resources. And then you'll see that there are under forms, a bunch of other links here for which we already discussed the project notification form and the consistency report form. I'm going to go to the local project checklist for right now, since we're talking about major development projects that require full commission review. So this document provides very specific, detailed instructions on exactly what is needed for a submittal of a local project that'll come before the commission. The first couple of pages will show the general process and key instructions regarding the project coordination, public notice, and complete submittals. And then, and sorry, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this, but we can always go back to it if you have additional questions. Then it goes into the actual checklist for general project information, mapping features, habitat protection areas, mitigation plans, and then state agency review. We also recommend that you coordinate a site visit with our office and other applicable agencies so that we can all kind of be on the same page and get a good look at the site in person. Once you compile all the information from that checklist, you'll send it to our CAC admin email. In the meantime, again, in the future, that process will change. But while we're still on this checklist, there are a few attachments that I want to point out. Attachment A is provides the detailed information regarding the public notice requirements. So public notice must be published for 1 business day in a local newspaper and provide at least 14 days for public comment, and signage must also be posted on site. So this has a lot of the nitty-gritty details about what that entails for public notice. Attachment B shows the tentative commission meeting schedule. Typically, our meetings are held on the first Wednesday of every month, although sometimes they're canceled due to just like a lack of projects. You'll also find on this chart the deadline to submit a project for review. A complete application package must be submitted to our office at least 6 weeks prior to the scheduled commission meeting. And then finally on here is the planting agreement. All applicable mitigation information needs to be filled out on here, and then the party responsible for the mitigation needs to sign it and include that with the total submittal package when you send it in. So that's the checklist. I'm going to go back to our website here, and now I'm going down to conditional approval form. So hopefully this will load too. So now we're going to be reviewing this form, which needs to be included along with the project checklist information if the project is not consistent with the local critical area program. So this may include a project that is over the allowable lot coverage limit, proposes to clear more than the allowed vegetation clearing limit, or proposes to impact any of the habitat protection areas listed in COMAR. So a conditional approval form or a conditional approval from the commission allows the local jurisdiction to complete the project provided specific criteria are met. These criteria are laid out in COMAR 2702-0601, and this form was created based on those criteria. In section B, you'll have to show that the project or program has certain characteristics that qualify it for conditional approval. In section C, you must list certain criteria that must be addressed as part of the overall conditional approval request. So for example, you need to describe the special features of the site that prevent the development from meeting the critical area requirements. This could include an explanation that the majority of the site is within the buffer and impacts would be unavoidable, or maybe the site is currently already over lot coverage. You have to describe the substantial public benefits to the critical area program. This could include treating stormwater that wasn't previously treated. It may include habitat enhancement on site, or maybe even green infrastructure or climate resiliency benefits. You'll have to show how the project is otherwise consistent with the critical area program. So this means describing all the ways that the project does meet the critical area requirements. And then finally, you'll have to describe the measures to mitigate the impacts, which should be in addition to any mitigation typically required. So this mitigation can be in the form of additional plantings or additional stormwater management or other habitat and water quality benefits that go above and beyond the basic requirement. And so, all right, that kind of covers our forms. That's just like an overview of the general project submittal requirements. As you saw, there are a bunch of resources on our website, including all the forms. But I want to reiterate that you can always come to our office, to your critical area contact, if you have any questions about the review process for a specific project. We're available and happy to help. So are there any questions just based on what I know? I kind of breezed through it all, but are there any general questions? We are going to go into a Q&A session with Brian, so this is another opportunity to ask questions, but before we jump into that, just wanted to check in with everyone. All right, well, hearing none, I would now like to welcome Brian Soper with the City of Salisbury, who has graciously agreed to participate in a Q&A with us. Brian, are you able to unmute and just kind of do a quick introduction, say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I would like to say, too, that is far more paperwork than Ron Swanson would ever fill out. I'm Brian. I've been with the City of Salisbury for about a year. My previous experience working in the critical area was in Dorchester County for 5 years, which was really where I cut a lot of my teeth during doing a lot of rural development. At that time, too, I was also managing floodplain and subdivision review, so it was kind of nice to get the full package together. A big shift coming over to the city, obviously more IDA than anything else. So that was a little bit of a learning curve, but it's also, good working with these people here to get everything together. So that's kind of where I am. So we can get started.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm going to kick us off with some questions that I had, but I would like to encourage others to chime in with your own questions if you have any. So first off, Brian, can you give us a little background about what the interface between you and the applicant typically looks like?
Sure. So it just depends on the scale of the project. At the time when I was dealing more RCA and IDA, or RCA and LDA, most part is a lot of homeowner interaction. They would they would sometimes come in and give me an idea what they were doing. And at that point, we could discuss whether they could handle it themselves or if we were looking probably have to hire a surveyor. In the IDA, obviously the projects are a lot larger for the most part, so pretty much strictly dealing with engineers and surveyors right out of the gate. I always encourage them as soon as I get landed a little bit to kind of come in and talk about it first before they even get to their submittal to us, so that we can kind of get an idea before they start spending money to do a lot of design work if we can catch something early. For the homeowner in the IDA, that's been a little bit different. It really just depends on the size of the project, what we're going to require for me to look at. We've had some people come in that they want to put in a shed. We don't feel the need for them to have to go hire an engineer to do that surveying work. So that's typically what it looks like. It's a lot of case-by-case analysis, but working with the surveyors and engineers, the one thing that I did learn very early on with them is they just want to see consistency. So they want to make sure that we're going to get the same answer, and they begin to learn which ones seem a little weird that they'll need a different to come in for. So that was a good experience with them. It's just they want that consistency to know they're going to get the same answer every time.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Another question I had is, what sort of hurdles have you faced when it comes to putting together a complete submittal package to send to our office? And then do you have any processes in place to make that process easier or suggestions for when you get stuck?
So a lot of times the hurdles haven't come necessarily from me. They kind of come from, making sure we get everything from the engineers and surveyors or the applicant. It can be difficult at times, understanding that, I prefer to obviously give you guys 30 days. I know you're only looking for 14, but depending on the scope of the project, I want to make sure that we give you all enough time. So I try and work backwards with the applicant, and sometimes they have a hard time understanding why, it's 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there, but you try and be upfront with them to kind of get everything submitted. Usually the one thing I do come across that's pretty odd is trying to fill in the answers to the woodlands or forest on site. I end up having to a lot of times go in and for the initial project submission, I end up having to go on our own GIS and try and draw it out. So hence why a lot of my submissions have approximately. So, but that's something we catch before final plan to make sure that the engineer or the surveyor shows that on the final plan to show how much they have. We have had some discussions sometimes with applicants. They'll ask exactly, I have one tree on the property. Do we have to identify that? Do I have to give you the square footage for that? Typically, I always say, give me everything or everything. So that can be a little difficult too. If they think I have one small tree, do I need to show it? Some of the procedures that we may have in place, we're still fleshing out our code update for the city. Previously with Dorchester, it was making sure having the forms filled out ahead of time with everything to make sure we get those in. A lot of times what was going to you guys then was for variances or planning commission. So that was pretty standard. We had applications for that already. So then we could just send that up to you guys. So that's pretty much what we had there. And when I get stuck, I always default call you guys.
Awesome. That works. Yeah, that's what we like to hear. And I just had one other question. Just how, or do you have a different process in terms of when you're reviewing a project in the critical area that does not require review by our office?
No, the process is still pretty much the same. So ultimately what I want is I want to make sure that when we have something that comes in, again, that consistency part, that the application is always the same, but making sure that our application is representative of what you all may be looking for in a project submittal. So that way, even if it's not going to you all, we're getting the same information. So that way a surveyor or applicant knows that they only have one form they have to fill out, and then we take care of the rest.
Great.
So
Awesome.
a lot of times it depends on the project too. The city ultimately has the call to require a site plan at any point, engineered site plan. So what we usually try and get that really early. I always defaulted if it was even questionable about whether it was going to be in the buffer, they had to get a survey. I wasn't going to go out in the field and try and do my own delineation. So yeah, if the buffer came in question, it was definitely a surveyor. There wasn't any doubt. So
yeah. Okay. Awesome. Does anyone else on the call have any questions for Brian? It's kind of helpful, I think, to get a local perspective in terms of someone who's actually been in your shoes and dealing with this process, because, we in our office don't really see that on the back end. So if you all have any questions, feel free to unmute or throw something in the chat.
I could add too, if anybody's thinking about something, when working with staff on some of these issues, never be afraid to have them call and try and get them to come out on site. I think, when I was working in Dorchester, the landscape was so much different, trying to apply the regulations. So it became difficult, and it was very helpful. I know when Charlotte and Alex and Kate came out and actually got to look at some of the sites that we had to kind of explain, this is what I'm thinking I'd like to implement. Can we do it? And it did become it became very obvious when they got out there. Our biggest issue we usually ran into was trying to get buffer mitigation done. Well, it's really hard to get trees planted in Dorchester County in the southern half of the county. So we worked pretty hard to come up with guidelines and stuff for that. Again, providing consistency to the homeowner so they knew what they were looking for.
right.
I'd actually be curious, Annie, if I could throw one back to you. Do
Uh-oh.
you know of any other jurisdictions that are doing like have a similar program to like Ocean Cities, or is it just Ocean City with that program where they have, their program is mainly fee based?
Oh. Um,
Maybe the closest would be Baltimore City. I don't know, Nick, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, Baltimore City's probably closest. They are considered to be waterfront revitalization areas, and so they don't have your standard buffer. So they do have some buffer mitigation at times, but it definitely is more fee-based, particularly for stormwater, but also for some buffer plantings. And so they do a lot of grant programs, a lot of tree plantings, education, stormwater management elsewhere within the city, particularly within the floodplain and within the critical area. So they're one. The only other thing, this is very, very, very different, but from statewide, the port is now all fee-based for stormwater and for buffer, and then they're using that to do some grant projects through Chesapeake Bay Trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a little bit of a different animal than a town, but
Yeah.
Those are options out there if there's high levels of impervious, if you want to think about fees and trying to like sort of locate and target mitigation to other areas using fees. Those are always options that we can talk to with the town.
What do their submittals look like? I mean, do they vary much from, what Annie kind of ran through, or?
City submittals look exactly the same. It's the same sheets. Consistency report is the same. It's all pretty much the same. I will say one thing that, sorry, Bruno's usually here. I think Bruno's not here today. Show a lot of times, along with the notification form, actually submit sort of like a one-page sheet saying, whoever the planner is, like it's Kate Durant time. Like, hi Kate, I looked at this. Here's why I think this is consistent with our program. We're collecting this much fee. The fee is based on this amount of mitigation, this amount of stormwater. And then when they do their grant projects, they actually send those grant projects up to the planners here to take a look at before they actually authorize the use of the money to get an idea of how it's being used. So that's probably the biggest difference.
Okay. Thanks. I knew there was a little bit different beast there, so I was kind of curious how those were done.
Yeah, it's good. Ocean Cities, yeah, it's the same thing. It's mostly fee-based. They still submit the same notification form. But Gail is a wizard there. And so when she does all the math, it's kind of okay, your program. We're going with that, but she does a good job of using those fees. And then she definitely uses those to reinvest very well back into stormwater projects for the entire city. She does a really great job with that. Great person to talk to if you want to talk about innovation and innovative ideas. So Brian, I guess a question for you, Brian. So since you've worked for the county, you work for the town, are there anything like, I think you talked a little bit about challenges in the county. Are there challenges in the town that you think are things that you would like to figure out alternatives to?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences is definitely handling the level of growth. And, Salisbury is currently seeing a tremendous amount of growth. We have quite a few developments. We have quite a few developments under construction and many more in the pipeline. We're currently investing pretty hard in our urban core, which most of that is in the critical area downtown. The picture actually is a really good example. So that's an older one too, because there's a large 14-story building that's under construction that's not in that photo. So the biggest issue there is kind of where I wish we had more of the fee-based ordinance set up, because I feel like we could be getting more out of the development that we're seeing to be able to reinvest it for ourselves into stormwater management projects. Downtown does have flooding issues. So being able to, jump on hand in the idea of addressing water quality for critical area, but also addressing resiliency for floodplain, but at the same time promoting economic development, that's kind of key. And, a lot of times you're going to it's easier to collect the fee and have the city implement the project versus relying on the developer to do it. Or trying to get them to do it without them complaining that it's going to hold up the project. So it's amazing how they're more willing to turn over money than they are to sometimes do the work. So that's really the biggest difference. Some of the other things I struggle a little bit with too is to the north in this photo, that's closer towards Salisbury University. That's more neighborhood based. So sometimes applying the IDA standards to was essentially a lot of single family homes can be somewhat problematic. When people want to do minor renovations and trying to figure out what they want to do, there's some tweakings I want to do in there with the code that might be acceptable to make it a little bit easier, not easier, but lowering the standard a little bit relative to the larger development projects to try and make it a little bit easier for the homeowner to kind of navigate what they have to do without having to hire somebody to do it. Because there's varying amounts of income right in that neighborhood from low, medium to high. So trying to address those issues with each project is a little different. What I'm hoping to do in the code too, new code, and what we incorporated when we did the code in Dorchester as well was trying to get more resiliency into the code. So understanding that, when you look at a critical area project, it's not just looking at critical area. You need to consider floodplain. You need to consider existing development patterns. So, the floodplain is really the key because you can do a lot. You can make those floodplain and critical area, you can make those two programs work really well together. And I think that's really important. I believe Annapolis does a really good job of that. And there's some other jurisdictions too, but that is really key because I've made the case for a variance to be granted based on the floodplain. And anything we can do to reduce that risk, I think is always important.
That's a good timing, Brian, because a couple of us in our office are trying to really rethink stormwater and resiliency, and so we might be reaching out to you to talk about some things we're thinking about, and maybe Salisbury could be a good place to test some ideas. But definitely coming to those same realizations about trying to make resilient practices and dealing with floodplain, but dealing with growth and how to manage that in these areas. And so, very good point.
I just saw Jen posted in the chat. How could I forget the incredible work that Cheryl's done in Oxford? She's done amazing work. And I've seen a lot of that. She's done amazing work without just getting that community to buy in has been amazing.
And that's a great segue into what our next training will be. So I'll be presenting on our stormwater requirements, and Cheryl is actually going to be our guest speaker to talk a little bit more about what she's done in Oxford. So thank you for bringing that up, Jen and Brian.
Yeah, before we got to get out of here, one thing that I think we're going to have some issues with going forward with Salisbury in the critical area is we are currently looking at we've done a port feasibility study, so there could be some potential port expansion as well. So we're trying to navigate that, kind of what we're seeing. We have, we're the second largest port in Maryland. So we're trying to, we have a couple things in play related to a lot of ours is completely import related to grain, gravel, and oil. Well, our problem is potentially with the decrease in the amount of oil being used or gasoline, that we're going to have to find another way to increase our tonnage to keep up our dredging. So we're trying to, in the early stages of that. So early on, we'll be thinking about critical area and trying to, understand what we have to do for that.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think I know, Brian, we've talked about this with the city's critical area program, but, we're very happy to work with towns and cities, local municipalities in their longer term planning efforts, and how the critical area program can really accommodate those plans. And, definitely we're open to innovative ideas related to like the stormwater management, incorporating resiliency, that kind of thing. So I think it's always nice, like the more information a town has or a city has about what they are planning to do in the town, or what some of their goals are, in using that to inform the critical area program can just be really, I mean, we want it to work for you all, right? So we're always open to ideas related to that. So
All right, great. Thank you so much, Brian. Does anyone have any other questions or comments or anything? Nothing? All right. All right. Well, thank you again, Brian. That was extremely helpful. I think that it was really insightful, and I think we got some good discussion in there, and hopefully other folks can take away some ideas for innovative, long-term planning. And of course, our office is always open and happy to help in any way that we can. So thanks again, Brian.
Sure. Thanks.
All right. So before I let you go, I just wanted to point out, as Charlotte said, our next training will be focused on stormwater management and the 10% rule. And that'll be held on Thursday, November 17th. We are also working on a couple additional trainings. I know on Thursdays, our November's session is kind of the last scheduled training that we have on our calendars. But we are working on a couple more just based off the survey results that we received. So I think we're going to try to pull together a training for comprehensive reviews and for growth allocation. So keep an eye out for that. We'll send out more information when we get those together, but we're thinking potentially early next year, like February, March, or something like that. We'll be able to have some trainings for those topics. And then if anyone thinks it would be helpful to do a more in-depth walkthrough of any of these forms that I reviewed today, just let me know. We can either do like a one-on-one thing, or we can do another training like this, where we kind of like walk through the project notification form in more detail for like a variance, like I did, but it kind of walked through the variance process a little bit more, in terms of like the variance standards and other requirements. Or we could do something similar with a consistency report. Just let us know. We're happy to pull something else together if other people would find it helpful. But other than that, that's all I have for you today. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and have a happy Halloween.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
everybody.
Thanks.